Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Develop. I'm Chris Woolley, your host. And if this is your first time joining us, well, welcome. Let me introduce myself. Well, I actually just did. I'm Chris Woolley. And what we do with Let's Develop is we bring in awesome photographers from all over, and they share information with us. It's an hour-long webinar. Today we've got Chris Paulis, who's going to be doing intro to photographic restorations, which is going to be super, super cool. This is a webinar type format. So if you do have questions, put them into chat on the side. I'll be monitoring that and asking Chris, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the program, as well as a couple of relevant ones during the program. So make sure that you're putting those questions into chat on the side, because if you have it, chances are somebody else does too. Now, we do have a new episode that comes out every 2 weeks. So you can view the whole lineup that's there on ACI's website, acilab.com/let's-develop, as well as check out the archive of past episodes. So if you missed the last episode with Corey McDonald on doing epic senior portraits, a very illustrative effect to sports portraits for seniors, holy cow, you're going to want to check that out, and that replay is live. So we're going to jump in here for real quick, but want to say thank you again to American Color Imaging for help bringing this here. All right, so I've got Chris Paulis here, and for those of you that don't know Chris, he's a master photographer, photographic craftsman, master artist, CPP. His accolades just go on and on and on. Career teacher and educator, so he helps photographers that want to get like their CPP degree, become profitable in product photography, or learn restoration, which is what we're here for today. And he started doing more and more of these workshops on restorations with the pandemic, and working towards an ASP Educational Associate degree on how restorations are evaluated in image competition. He's got lots of accolades and accomplishments when it comes to this, including the 2019 Southeast District Photo Competition, where he got first place in the Artist Open and Artist Restoration categories. And then from 2019 to 2021, he got 5 GIA finalists, and he won one of these as Grand Imaging for photographic restoration. So he is crazy, crazy talented. And Chris, you here with us?
I sure am.
Hey, there he is.
Hey there.
All right. Well, you've got quite a bit of information to share with us, huh?
Yep.
Yep. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Is that a cue to get started?
Let's get started. I know you were mentioning before that you had a ton of information here.
Yep, ton of information that I have done in 2 hours, I've done in full days, and I'd love to do it at school sometime, because it could be a whole lot of fun to spend 4 days working on your own project while we learn back and forth together. So tonight it's a glimpse into the process. So you're going to get a taste of what photographic restoration is all about, and hopefully you'll find it appealing if you haven't tried it yet. It's a great companion to running around the countryside with your camera. It gives you a reason to sit down for a little while and put another part of your brain to work. I'm going to say a bit more about that in a minute. But this stuff matters. It matters. It's not just some random art that I do and that you would do if you tried it out. Doing this, you get to meet some great people. And you get to hear some great stories. For example, this photograph here was brought to me at the beginning of a summer a year or so ago by a woman who was headed to Italy to visit her mother. And she wanted this photo restored and printed so she could take it to her, because her mother didn't have a copy and her father was long gone. So hearing that story, it fuels what I do. It connects me to the people who bring me their cherished damaged goods. So it gets me to connect to and contribute to those stories. I realized that when I finished a restoration and I handed it to someone, at times they'd cry. At other times they just almost like they hold it to their chest. I know this sounds cheesy, but it's like they were hoping that it would come back. And so my goal is to bring that back and to reconnect them to their story and their image. And I find that then I'm forever linked to that image too, because I've restored it for them. And that is a very great feeling when that happens. So if you're a portrait photographer, just keep in mind that your beautiful portrait sold some today might be valued someday so much that it gets damaged, but somebody wants to have it restored because it means that much to them and their heritage. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what is photographic restoration, what are we trying to accomplish, and we're going to sort of skate through a little bit. I'm going to mix my metaphors. We're going to give you a quick, think of what used to be Julia Childs. Think of a cook who in a cooking show has only an hour, but it actually takes 3 hours to bake the thing. So you see them mix it up, you see them toss it in the oven, and miraculously 3 seconds later it comes out of the oven and it's ready. Well, we're going to take that sort of an approach to restorations. You're going to see a little of what it takes. You're going to look over my shoulder when I worked on some things, and you're going to see also you're going to get to talk a little bit about problems that you see in some originals that I've restored.
Ooh, so we're going to be interactive here, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. And just another couple of slides, we're going to shift into that mode. But let's talk first, what's the target? What are we trying to achieve? Webster's dictionary says to bring back to or put back into a former original state. That's what a restoration is. No matter what it is that's being restored. If your home is being restored or a historic building or a photograph, we're trying to get it back to where it should have been, or it, to the best of our ability, could have been. It's restore. It's not reinterpret. Remain as true to the original as possible. And where details are lost, we still extrapolate from what remains or from historic equivalents. So there are times when I can't really tell what the furniture is or what the garment looked like exactly. And I go hunting for historic equivalents and bring those in to sort of do an authentic, realistic, interpretive. That's as interpretive as we can get. We're trying to make it look like it might have looked or it should have looked. Okay. So one thing that has just become really intriguing to me, and you heard Chris make that comment about some research I've done, which, by the way, Chris, nobody should really know about that in case there are any people who are going to judge that thing on this webinar.
You put it in your bio.
Oh, my bad. Oh, well. Okay,
don't tell
Cat's
anybody.
out of the bag. Cat's out of the bag. Anyway, I've always been intrigued by this difference between art and restoration. In competition, judges are judging these two categories that are within the larger division of artist. But the two are so very different. In the first place, restoration is a technical kind of pursuit, as opposed to art, which is creative. Now, let's elaborate on what some of that means. For art, we describe that as a divergent process. When you're working in art, you're starting at an idea, and you're blossoming out from there. You are making associations out to other things. The mind path separate from that idea into richer other ideas. For restoration, we're taking what looks like it's broken apart and we're bringing it back together. It's convergent. It's problem solving. It is technical. Art is primarily right brain. You sort of turn off your analytical side and you let your creative side sort of dream of what's possible. Well, the restoration artist only does that insofar as what might that have looked like and what can I do about it? It's primarily an analytical kind of task. Art is suggestive and poetic. It's metaphoric. It starts with an idea. It's subject that we see, but then that leads to other thoughts that the artist wants us to explore. In restoration, we don't want you out there exploring the world. We want you to see what this should have looked like. It's realistic. It's photographic. It's not impressionistic. So art values ambiguity and richness. Ambiguity is not lack of clarity, which this culture sort of has eroded that word into meaning. Ambiguity means a richness of multi-layered meaning. So we see this one meaning and it leads us to another meaning, which leads to another one, this impression, and so on. With restoration, we value clarity and simplicity. We're trying to get rid of any of those other things that might distract us into heading off into some other world or direction, unless we want you to connect a story to what you're looking at. There's the one sort of way in which it's different. So let's now take a look at some things. And here's where the interactive part of this will be. I'm going to show you some originals that need to be restored. And what I'll invite you to do is toss into the chat some of what you see is wrong and needs to be fixed. In what way has the photo been damaged that you know you're going to have to fix if you're the restoration artist? So here's our first one.
All right. So type into chat what you see. What issues need to be addressed here?
And then, Chris, you feel free to toss them out as people put them in.
Yep. Usually takes just a few seconds for people to type in answers. I'm sure we'll get them here soon. Let's see. Got Connie saying there's tears, faded, yellow, blurry. Maria saying tear on the lower side. Beverly, torn area. Alan, torn area. Writing damaged. Emulsion color.
Excellent. Excellent. So excellent. So you've nailed it. And sharpen needs to be sharpened. Look at how the definition of everything in this image has been deteriorated. So it's not just that it's faded. That's happened too. But we've lost texture here in what is a sweater. We've lost a lot of detail here in this tie. We see a little bit here in the face and eyes, so that's not too bad. And the best place is probably the hair. We have stains over here also where probably a frame was on this picture at some point. And I'm glad one of you noticed here that these words have been almost entirely lost. So let me show you what is, here's a restored version of this image. So you'll see, yes, I chose to restore the words in this case because as I put the pieces together and talked to the client, I realized that this was written by him for his family. And so those words are an important part of this particular image and its restoration. Sometimes words are not. You're going to see one a little later where the words were not integral to the image itself. They were sort of extraneous. They were add-ons by somebody later in time. And they distract from the image. Anyway, so let's take a look at another one.
All right. So what are we seeing that might need to be worked on here? We'll take it in with Charles and Agnes. A lot of detail, faded bottom, lack of detail seems to be a major one. Fogging.
Yeah, so look at this. Picture. Yeah. Anything else you see that you think might, so look at his suit.
Maybe lightened a bit.
Yeah, there's not much there from what we can tell. So
the
let
color?
me, Yeah, is this the result of yellow discoloration over time, or is this a sepia image that somehow has deepened in its color? Good job. So let's look at this a before and after through a slider, a little different approach.
Well, that's kind of fun.
This is what I've got on my restoration website so that potential clients can come and drag the sliders themselves and see the before and after. So you will notice, oops, let me see, I do have a better one. Let's go to here. So the cool thing in this particular one that nobody mentioned, because it's not something people would typically think about, but a lot of this degradation in the original over here, the speckling, and this is silver oxide that has deteriorated on the surface of the print. And when I received it, fortunately, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a God thing. I decided, let me see what happens if I put this on a light table, or if I shine an extremely powerful light from behind it. And I noticed there was detail there. And so in the process here, I created a digital original by photographing it lit from behind the print itself, and you could see it reveal detail that I could then bring out in my restoration that you really would have no idea was ever there before. So when I looked at this, my guess was it might have been a fireplace and a hearth, but I couldn't really be sure. Certainly couldn't be sure what was going on down here, where his feet were, whether his shoes were on upside down, or just what the deal was. And this gave me enough definition for me to then bring all of that back. So fun stuff. Let's take a look at another one. This will be our last one to look at. And let's let you toss some things into the chat.
Yeah, we do have a question while people are typing in what they're seeing with this image into chat.
Okay,
From Daniel,
sure,
let's know,
sure.
How do you light it from behind? What are you doing when that happens?
So in studio, I put this thing, I stretch it basically, and put the camera perpendicular to the center of it, and from behind it, use a powerful strobe and flash it. Now, I did this multiple times and actually did an exposure bracket with it so that I got darker and lighter tones that I could then combine in that digital original. And I believe I also did a surface lit version as well, so I could be drawing from different versions to get as much detail as possible. Good question. Okay, so Chris, what do we have?
So far, nobody's typed in anything.
Oh, really? That's because they were busy listening.
There we go. Now they're turning to Kevin. Lots of speckling all over it. I'm working on one that's like this. It's yellowed on a black and white.
Mm-hmm.
No, Donna wants you to know how you did the strobe thing.
Well, it's studio lights with a trigger on camera that fires the strobe in the same way you would with say a speed light, only it's a more powerful light behind it. And I did it so that it would be evenly lighted as well. Might have used some diffusion. It's been a while since I did that one. Okay, so in this speckling is a huge problem. Look at how much has been lost in the area of the boy's clothing. And when you come back to this as well. So mildew, mold, water spots, not sure what it is. The bottom line is the same. We've lost all kinds of detail here. We've lost depth of tonality in the original. Fortunately, we do have a sense of what these faces are, but a lot of work had to be done here, even in the surrounding portion of this cabinet card. We've got scratches. You can see scratches on the faces in this blow-up version, lots of cracks. So this one was a pretty demanding job. Here's the finished version. This one took quite a few hours of work.
Looks
a lot of my jobs have been jobs I've had to learn and grow while doing, and that's part of why I enjoy doing it. I started off on this to become a better digital artist, and it certainly accomplished that. So let's move into, I want to overview a general workflow, how the process goes start to finish roughly. You've heard a little of this already. We'll just have 2 slides in that just to give you a feel for some of what goes on. Then it's going to be all visual from that point on. First thing you've heard me say, analyze the original. Assess damage, determine how to make the best quality digital original. Sometimes that's laying it on a consumer-grade flatbed scanner and scanning it. Sometimes it's putting it on a flat surface and my camera on a camera stand above it, and it's photographing it. And you heard the third option. If I'm having to shine light through the back of it, then it's probably a more vertical orientation and a light from behind it. So my goal is get as much good data in my digital original as possible, because I'm going from paper, the damaged paper, to a digital original, and eventually I'm going to print it again and give them that physical print. So digitize the original, scan or photograph. Then one of the earliest things I do is adjusting tones and contrast. Always working on new layers upward as I go, so that not trying to do everything on one layer, because then you could get to a point where you close it, you open it back up again, you can't go backward and recover. So you do work on layers so that you can back up if you head down a wrong path, or you realize this isn't good enough, I need to back up a couple layers and do this again. That happens a lot with me, and so I've learned to make layers, even label the layers, so it's easy for me to backtrack, sort of like breadcrumbs in the forest. Remove and repair stains, adjust the tint if that needs to be. I use a hue saturation layer in Photoshop for that, and you'll see that. So don't worry about understanding all the different Photoshop things I'm going to say here. If you're not a Photoshop person, don't worry about it. Just look and appreciate. Maybe someday take a class. If it moves you, feel free. Repair major spots, imperfections, and rips. I've got these tiers in here. I should have removed them for you all. These relate to levels of difficulty and charges that I give, that I pass on to my clients. So tier 1 is very easy. I can do it probably in Lightroom. Tier 2, tier 3 requires some work. Tier 3 is the biggest area. It's where I've got hours of work to do, and it's expensive. So then eliminating scratches, dusts, and specks. That's sort of a mid-grade difficulty and higher. And I'm not going to read through these. These are various things that I might use in eliminating scratches, dust, and specks. They're further down the road if I'm doing a workshop with you. Rebuild missing details. So far, we've talked about getting rid of problems, and now we're starting to talk about building back what should be there. Okay? So emphasizing the subject always, that's the most important thing. Using clone stamp, mixer brushes, history brushes, even the standard paintbrush in different modes. This is all tier 3 and higher, meaning difficult, time-consuming, sort of expert level things.
That's where the artist comes in.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so that was, did I just go the wrong direction? I went the wrong direction. I don't know how that happened. There we go. One of the later things there is reconstructing particular details, and faces are even more demanding sometimes because we want faces to look like faces and not cartoons. If it looks like a cartoon, it's not what the original looked like. In competition, to me, that means cartoonish, it's not a merit. It's not worth considering well done. Rebuild the background. Again, mixer brushes, all kinds of things can be done there. If needed, colorize the finished image, depending on what the client wants. Colorizing may be one of those last things that you do. And then make finishing touches to integrate all the elements. I use a lot of layers where I add noise and mask it in to create the impression of texture and depth. So where, for instance, if you imagine a piece of cloth folding and light hitting it at an angle, there is going to be more grain where that light hits it at a steep angle, and then that grain is going to fall off. You're going to see more texture right at the juncture of shadow and light. That's where texture is greatest. So I emulate that when I restore. So what we're going to look at now is one particular restoration, and you're going to see it from every which way but loose here. And here's where we're doing pretty well on time. Not bad, Chris. Yeah. So this is the one that Chris mentioned that 2 years ago won the Grand Imaging Award for Restoration. The ordination of A.C. Elliott. This connects to family. This is my wife's family from 122 years ago. see, I'm forgetting. 5 of the men in this picture, I believe, are relatives in some way in her family tree, including the subject of it, who is her great-great-grandfather. And this older gentleman is his father-in-law. So that's the great-great-grandfather. This is a great-great-great-grandfather, if I'm getting that right. I might not be. But we're going to let me pause a second and let you toss into the chat again. What's wrong with this? What challenges do you see that I had to address?
So type into chat what you see needs to happen to this image. A lot.
Get some specifics. Nothing is too small or too large
there we
to
go.
mention.
Daniel saying missing faces.
Yeah, amen. This guy up here, who the heck is that? Yeah. That might even be her great-great-great-grandmother, for all I know.
I think everyone's speechless, besides saying there's a lot that needs to happen here. There's tape all over it, tears, yep. Covered faces.
Mm-hmm. Missing pieces, rips. There, if you look closely enough, you'll see where the tape was. There's even newsprint that transferred. So actually the tape is gone here. And what remains is a glue residue that yellowed and at a rate way more than the rest of the picture. So this is a stain. So I've got to get rid of all this staining. I've got to rebuild these things. And notice here how dark his pants are, but then they're light across where the tape went. So not only do I have to get rid of the stain, but I'm going to have to get these tones to match again so that you never knew there was tape here. In other places, things got darker rather than lighter. All kinds of detail missing. We see a hat over here. Now, what about this wording? This wording does not need to be in this photo, was my judgment. It was etched in or something by somebody down the line who could have put this as a caption or a little nameplate under the photo if it was framed. It didn't have to be scratched into the photo for us to remember. So lots of work. This one was a killer. I spent maybe 6 to 8 months on this one, putting it down, picking it up, going to bed with questions in my head and having the answer come to me at 3 a.m. I'll mention some of that as we go through, but we're going to now sort of Julia Child's version, do the baking of this, toss it into the oven and look at a couple of things as we go along the route. So the first one we're going to look at, this is a screen recording of when I was working on this en route to the finished version. And what I want to show you, I can pause this. And so we'll do a zoom on it. So notice what goes on here. So the first thing that I tackled, actually before we even got to this, you notice that it looks like a stronger definition in the garments where nothing's wrong. The tonalities are better. I've already done some toning and some correction of highlight, shadow, histogram correction through curves. So that's actually not bad. Notice the color now is also not a sepia color, but it makes the tape staining stand out. You can see on screen right now that what I'm about to do is open a hue saturation adjustment layer up here. I'm not going to say too much about that because you'll sort of see it happen. But basically what I'm going to do is take this and eliminate the stain by doing what's called colorize in a hue saturation layer. Click on colorize, it shifts it. Everything in the photo is one color. And then you drag this hue slider. You'll see it move as I move here over to where basically sepia is, only it's a very intense sepia. And what I do after that is drop the saturation on it. So it looks more, so using the Julia Child's theme, I season it to taste. I'm trying to get it where I want it to be, knowing that later I can come right back, do the same thing again and change it very easily by putting another hue saturation layer on top of what I've got. You'll notice here I've got these multiple layers starting to grow. Okay, so let me just show you a little bit more here in this fast forward Julia Child's version. So I went back and played around with that a little bit more just to highlight or emphasize it. Then I go down and I play with the lightness slider, and I often will try that, but much of the time it doesn't help. And so I put it right back in the middle. I like where it was because I'd already adjusted the tonality with a curves layer or a levels layer, I think, before that. I'm not sure I'm showing that at this point, but by the way, I went through 11 versions of this. I'll say more about this later. When I get to a certain point, I keep an eye on how large this file is getting. And then I will save as and put V2, V3, V4. And then I'll combine layers at the bottom and start working above that again so that I'm not overtaxing my, my computer. And also, it's a fallback. It's a fail-safe. Okay, so there's that, playing around with that again. And that's that. So that's one thing I'll do. And here's that little panel that I was showing you. It was really tiny. Here it is large so you can see what it is. Hue saturation adjustment layer with colorize. So click colorize button after I create that layer on top. I adjust the hue to the color that I want. Then I adjust the saturation so that the amount of that color is what I want it to be. And I might play with this, but more often than not, I end up coming back to right in the center with no adjustment to lightness or darkness. So I mentioned color adjustment layer. This was a little bit of that thrown in after I did the colorize. And now look, the next step, I begin moving on to repairing spots and large flaws using a healing brush or a clone stamp. Healing brush is a very easy tool to use. So there's no reason to make it harder than it should be. Healing brush allows you to go over things like this right here. Actually, let me go back. So healing brush in places out in the wide open, I keep hitting that thing, might get rid of these darker lines that are at the edge of the glue marks. Get rid of spots and things like that. Get rid of this white area here, these little white flecks, anything that is easy. This scratch, the healing brush will take care of. This scratch as well, and so on. This little crack, healing brush will do quite adequately. And so you can see I try to deal with things that can be done with that tool quickly, and then I move on to something more difficult, and the clone stamp becomes an important tool. So here you can see I've done a little bit of work. We're going to move on beyond that and look at just appreciate some of how this thing is gradually improving. Look at the ground, for instance.
You're following your checklist, going one step at a time, huh?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's not really a checklist. It's a general pattern. Sometimes I don't go in quite that order. Sometimes I do multiple things over again. Those levels adjustments and curve, hue saturation, layer adjustment. Those are things that I will come back and do a little bit later just to make sure I haven't drifted off of where I want to be. So, but I want to show you now, pull the cake out of the oven or the next thing out of the oven. This is using the clone stamp tool. Let's see if good, it's rolling. I'll freeze it. So here I'm going to use the clone stamp tool in darken mode first. Actually, this is the history brush in darken mode, or multiply mode, I'm sorry, multiply mode. What happens in multiply mode is it will darken whatever you draw over. If you want to, if you draw over something, well, sorry, I'm getting too complicated. Multiply allows me to outline the edges here because what I'm going to do next will be in a different mode that will honor these dark lines, these outlines, and preserve the outline of his jacket. And let me show you how that goes. So I'm still outlining because I just want to remember, don't want to lose where these important details occur. So what I'm doing now, I am now using a clone stamp tool, and let me show you what's going on. So if you can see this, this little plus is the source point. When you go to the clone tool, you are going to have a source and a destination. So you create this point, you option click to get it, then you move your brush and you start to paint. And every time you do that, it's going to read from down here and put it up here. Now, what I wanted to do is only make this lighter from this tone down here that is the tone I want up in the upper area that's light. So I go into darken mode. So my tool is in darken mode. And so what it's doing is it's comparing the destination to the origin. And if the destination is lighter, it's going to copy the origin tone to that area. It's going to darken what needs to be darkened. So watch what happens. And watch where it doesn't happen.
Is worth the entire program right now. This is just mind-blowing. You've never done it before.
Yeah. And so, but notice there are places that are imperfections here that are dark. They're darker than the source. So they're not getting replaced. The same goes for this darker outline. I can paint freely and fast as long as I don't go out into something lighter. And it'll keep my outline and paint in the lighter area. It's really easy to come back to this and correct this as long as I'm careful not to wipe out my outline. And so let's get there and let me show you what I do next. So notice I am now, look what's going on. All I did was flip up here from darken to lighten mode, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, only being a little more careful because it's lightened, it's going to paint out all of these other darker areas, including these outlines if I hit them. So here I got to be a little more careful that I don't wipe out the outlines I created. You can see I did that a little bit. So it's real easy to come back and fix these up. What it actually ends up doing here is it makes it all the same tone. So it's lost texture. I want texture later on. I'll have to bring that texture back in. That's part of the rebuilding process. So you can see.
And this is recorded, everyone, so you can go back and rewatch his steps on what he's doing here.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the next little piece. So I did that, rebuilding the jacket tones all over the place. And at some point, notice then, clone tool is really easy for places like that siding back there. All that siding was rebuilt from this little piece right here by cloning and stamping. So look at all of the siding that got rebuilt just from that one little piece. Once you build it out a little bit farther, you can then change where you're cloning from and make it a larger area. So I shift up here, and I then clone from there out, and I've got a larger region to draw from. There are more nuances to this. I won't go into them. They're sort of more fine points that when we're studying together, there are things that I clarify about the clone tool that are important. So notice, look at the jackets. Jackets have been cleaned up a bit. You saw part of what went on with the one jacket earlier. Look at the spots in the jacket on the seated man. Now, in this one, what I chose to do instead of clone, the standard paintbrush in darken and lighten mode will serve the same purpose. So I sample a tonality that I want to draw in, either lighter or darker, in similar areas of the jacket, and I paint them in. Then I switch to the darker mode and paint in areas like in these creases that I want. And I found that to be extremely fast. So here again, at some point, I will then throw another curves adjustment, because it feels to me as if all of a sudden tonalities are starting to become softer, and the contrast needs to be bumped up again. So at key points, I will throw another curves layer on it and just check it out, see if it's where I like it to be. Now, the seated man with the white beard, he's a little too bright here. So eventually I'm going to make it better. So one of the things we're going to go on to here is the man with no face. What do we do about him? Well, fortunately, somebody in the family had this copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. And you can tell, look how bad this is. There's no way I'm going to restore that one. I used it to figure out what his face looked like, and took like 3 or 4 different attempts from this particular piece to recreate his face. It was not easy. So there's one attempt that looks horrible, but it's better than what we had, isn't it? There's the thing. It's like, so I'm showing you that at a different place. So here's another little slider, and I'll show you this quickly. This is, again, the clone tool. When you're rebuilding faces, there's a nice little feature of this clone tool. Uh-oh, we just got a tornado warning in this area until 9 p.m. Let's hope it doesn't hit here, folks, or we're going to be off into the wild blue yonder.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a surprise. Okay, so what's going on here is that the clone stamp tool allows you at times to mirror the clone. And so I will clone somebody's ear. I will clone from the opposite side of the face. So what you're seeing here, down in this little box here, I click the clone source that allows me to make a source point at the center, the iris of his eye, and come over here and click and start painting. And it's going to make it symmetrical, going like this. So as I move one, the other one goes the other direction. And it's how we take our faces, which are what this is called bilateral symmetry. And this tool has now become a bilateral symmetrical tool. And so I can paint his eyes in or paint the side of his face in around his eye. Now, at some point, that becomes wrong because he's actually not looking straight at the camera, but I can deal with that later. Now, the other thing I want you to notice is I did this to a new layer. Because I know his face is turned a little bit, I'm going to need to reshape this side of his face. So what I did was I cloned from down here onto this layer up here, this blank layer, so that I can come back and reshape this and manipulate just this piece without affecting the overall image. And eventually, when I'm happy with it, I combine them and I move on. So you can see I'm accumulating a whole bunch of layers here as I move forward.
Chris, do have a couple of questions. One on there was with the cloning. Where did you get the mirror flipping tool at?
It's called the Clone Source panel.
So you just go to Window, Clone Source.
So when you click the clone tool, you want to go up to Windows and, yes, select Clone Source. It'll pop up, and then you can go manipulate. So you can mirror it horizontally, mirror it vertically. You can do both at the same time if you want. And I've done that. If I'm rebuilding a plaid garment, for instance, I might take a bottom corner of a section and do a double clone, vertical and horizontal, so that it's going to take that and it's going to replicate it in other places. It's like wax on, wax off.
And then
on that old movie.
The face that you restored, what do you do if you don't have like a source photo to work from?
Well, there might be a time when you cannot restore it. So if you have nothing to work from, you either have to tell your client, I really can't restore that face because I have no reference. Or, you ask, can you mind if I cut him out?
So you're not adding in a selfie of you in there?
Or do you mind if I go find some older guy and put his head on there? Does it matter to you? Is he one of the relatives or not? That's probably what it's going to come down to. So yeah. Anyway,
thank you.
We're doing well on time here. Hopefully, I can. So you're going to see a couple of my attempts. I tried first drawing one, then I made that copy out of the reference image. Look at the difference here. And I did some painting to bring it up, and then I had to do a colorize again to get that color to be the same as everybody else's. Oh, nope, I don't want you to see this. We don't have time for it. Because I want you to be able to have time to, actually, maybe what I could do, I'm gonna show you super fast forward here, just like I did the other one. So I'm gonna let you see beginning to end roughly. It was really hard to rebuild this because I didn't do this with creating this video in mind, but I do want you to get a feel for some of the progress throughout this thing. This thing, for instance, I mentioned that I will mask in noise. This is what you're seeing here. This is the actual mask and where I've painted noise in for realism. So you can see if you look at the noise in the man's jacket, then down on the ground. That's not noise. That is noise on top of a gravel image that I brought in. And then finishing touches, and then down to the final version. And this is how I presented it in competition. I put this in here. I made it so it was really obvious, similar reference image, so that it made them think, oh yeah, notice that he's got no head. He came from here. He did this. And the difference between here and here is significant. So let's let you see the slider on this one. So just sort of the more direct comparison as it slides across. Notice the noise and texture in the clothing. It varies from person to person and garment to garment. I've also got texture in faces because I want skin texture there. It's very fine grained and very, you wouldn't notice it unless you put a magnifying glass of some kind on it. And one little piece that I mentioned, because I heard this in competition a number of times, but notice this little leaf down here. One judge at some point, as I was running it through the sequence, said, well, you did all this work. Why'd you leave that leaf down there? I left it down there because it's cool. You know, it's real world. It's real world. So a couple of takeaways, and then I'll be done. And you can ask questions
afterwards too.
Well, good. That's why I said I'll be done, and you can ask questions. So some key takeaways: work on layers, building as you go. Label your layers. As your file grows large, save as, and make a new version. You've always got those older versions behind you if you need them. Merge previous layers in the new version, and retain the original base layer. And I didn't talk about what the adjustments group was, but it's that levels adjustment that basically adjusts contrast in red, green, and blue channels. It's the hue saturation layer that is colorized, and I adjust saturation and hue, and it's a curves layer. So I will keep those in each version. I will also, with the original base or in key references like that reference photo, I will keep that in there, and I'll drag it to the top so I can regularly compare where I am now with where I'm trying to get. When rebuilding details, especially faces, clone to a blank layer, one object at a time. It gives you flexibility and extra control that you can then manipulate just the pieces until you're thoroughly happy with them. So why take up photographic restoration? Develop skills that apply to retouching other kinds of work. It has really improved my commercial photography, my product photography, and my portrait work. Provides additional income. In the pandemic, that was certainly true. People could come, drop them off on the front porch. We'd talk outside. I'd go in and do the work. Fills gaps between photo gigs. When you're down, when you have downtime, pick up one of these. It bolsters your overall market presence and connects new clients and referrals to your business. I have had all kinds of other clients come through this work, and it contributes to other stories and your own. And that's inestimable, of incredible value. It's sort of why we like doing what we do. So I've also grown to realize that putting a good title on a competition entry can make all the difference in the world. Put on a happy face is the title of this one. Didn't need to know their names, not important, but it set the stage for a story to be told. Okay, I'm done doing my thing.
All right. Well, we got some questions for you. So Deborah wants to know, when you're scanning, what DPI do you normally use?
It depends. That's a great question. If it's an 8x10, then I'm going to print it 8x10. I scan it at 300 DPI or PPI, actually. So pixels per inch in the digital format become dots per inch in a printed format. If it's a smaller image that I'm going to need to enlarge, I'm going to do it at 600 or even 1200, and occasionally I've done a 2400 PPI scan. If it's something I'm photographing, I do it at the largest. I do it at the native resolution of my raw camera.
So get as big as you can so you can work with the file?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You want to have as much data as possible, but you don't need to waste space. So, I mean, if you know you're only going to be printing it at the same size you're scanning, there's no reason to go to 6 and 1200 and have throwaway data. It's only going to jam up your computer's RAM.
Okay. Approximately how many hours do you spend per piece? I know it varies, but do you have
It really does vary. I'd say most of the jobs that are brought me, it takes an hour to 2 to do. You've seen a couple here that were extraordinarily more rigorous and time consuming, and they were self projects from family photos. That one that we looked at where you weighed in and it was the family standing there and it had all those speckles and splotches, that one probably took me 10 hours. But again, I was learning while I was doing it. And then the restoration we just went through, I'm not even sure how many hours that took because I put it down and picked it up, and the goal was get this right. And it taught me a lot of things that speed up my workflow. I've mentioned some of those as well.
When you're photographing them, do you lay the image on glass or sandwich it between glass? Or
sometimes I do. If there's any warping to it at all, I will do that. And then I will polarize the light and use a circular polarizer on my lens so that there's absolutely no reflection coming off of that. And ideally, you might want to do that. I mean, what I've thought about, but it's extremely expensive, is to get optical quality glass where there would be no distortion of light coming through it. Window glass is not ideal because it's wavy, it's not optical in quality, but optical glass is extremely expensive. That if I were going to be doing this another 20 to 30 years, which I won't be, look at me. I mean, I'll do it as long as I enjoy it and so on. But if I had a long path ahead, I'd be buying optical glass. I'd buy a 16 by 20 inch sheet. I think I priced it. It was thousands of dollars, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is spendy. I've got 2 more questions that we can answer real briefly.
Okay.
If an image is sepia, do you keep it in sepia, or do you ever change tones, or when do you colorize?
I tend to keep it in sepia. I love sepia. It says historic. And even if it was a black and white, sometimes a sepia still adds sort of historical authenticity to it. If it comes to me black and white, it's going to go back black and white. But if I'm doing it for me, I love sepia.
And
even if it's a very faint.
We have time for semi-related. Can you very, very quickly go over what your colorization process is? A teaser on how to colorize?
I am in the process of learning more about that, which is to say I don't do much of it. It's a more complex task than just picking a color and painting a face, because what you need to learn to do is find particular tones that occur in the cracks. All of our faces have many colors in them, and to just paint a face one flesh tone makes it look more cartoonish. So there's depth to it. So I go at it from that perspective. I will try. I've started to collect colors that have come from photographs that I can then apply in wrinkles, in
That's smart.
shadows, because the color changes in a shadow. And so that's part of what goes on. But I am not an expert at that. I know others in this field, Chris does too, who do more of that than I do, and they're probably better at it than I am. I feel like I'm pretty good at monochromatic. I can do
Find what you enjoy.
colorization. I can do colorization as needed. And when it happens, I will dive in deeply to get it right. So,
cool. Well, I've
because
got
I don't have
few prizes to
Go
give
ahead.
away, and then we'll come back and check in with you in just a second. So I do have some giveaways from American Color Imaging. Do also want to let you know about a special they've got going on right now that's exclusive to us. So you can check that out. You can get $100 off a $200 or more order on ultra cloth or rubber mats. So you can check that out. Also, if you're got an email from me, you'll see that I made a video on how to actually photograph for creating your own backgrounds, because Background Town's got a contest that's going on in one of the Facebook groups. We were talking about how I like to photograph things a little bit differently for background printing. So that could be a great time to try it out. And want to let you know about some upcoming programs. We've got the Art of Storytelling with Christy Steves, Capturing the Soul of the Landscape with Jeff Johnson, and Unleashing Your Creativity with Passion Projects with Justin Tedford. Those ones are all coming up, and registration is open on those. And as always, if you do have ideas of content that you would like to see, a guest, something like that, shoot me an email so that I know these are all about you guys, and the speakers that we get are selected by you. So just let me know. I'll do the legwork, and I'll track everybody down. All right, so now it's time for some prizes. Up first, we've got a $50 lab credit to American Color Imaging. We'll see who that winner is. We got the wheel spinning now. I love the wheel. Congratulations, Scott. You've just won a $50 lab credit. Up next, we've got a $75 lab credit. And we'll see who that winner is. And that one's Susan Johnson. All right, and we've got our grand prize now, a $100 lab credit. And the winner on that one... and that's Amy. Congratulations, Amy. Jotting that down so we can get that added to your account. All right. Holy cow, Chris, we're back with you. So if somebody wants to learn more about restorations or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
You can find me on Facebook. I'm Chris Paulis. I also have a Chris Paulis Photography Facebook page, and my website is also Chris Paulis Photography, or restorationphotosmd.com.
Cool. So
probably a good way to get through to me.
Your contact information in the follow-up email that's going out. I know
you've got my email, so put that in there too.
Okay, your email will go out then to everybody as well. I just had a blast learning from you, Chris. You could definitely tell you've got some passion when it comes to these restorations and sharing information with it. Just speaking from a personal thing, if any of you watching right now ever get a chance to take a longer format class with Chris, it's worth it. He's definitely brought us down to try to fit within this webinar format, and there's so many details, tips, and tricks, and things like that. It's way worth going to a long format for it to really, really learn what you can do when it comes to restorations. So thank you so much, Chris. Any parting words for us?
I'll just mention that I will be teaching this in Colorado Springs on June 11th. So if y'all are in the Colorado area and don't know about that, hunt down the Colorado Springs affiliate and talk to them, and they can get you registered.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.